Welcome, folks, to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. I am, of course, your host, Chris White, and this is the LinkedIn Live program for technical sales professionals and technical sales leaders. And folks, these are live conversations. As I like to say, these are by design, unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable conversations. And I'm joined today by a sales engineer, a professional in our field, whom I actually saw on a recent panel. I think maybe it was Demo Fest. And I was struck by her poise. I was struck by her insights. And if I can use the term for a younger professional, an early career professional, and I reached out and we had a great conversation. I invited her to be on the show, and here she is. Her name is Savannah Foreman. She is a recently appointed, if I can use that term, solutions consultant with a company called User Testing. She also happens to be a podcaster herself. She's got her own podcast called Sessions with Savannah, and she likes to talk about sales engineering and the journey that she's been on, and she's starting to share some thought leadership. And today's conversation is, so you think you want to be a sales engineer? Savannah, thank you so much for being here. It's nice to see you again. How are you doing today?
Absolutely. And thank you for having me, Chris. I'm doing well today. I'm really excited about this. I'm excited to dive into all things SE.
Well, I'm super glad to have you. And you said that you've seen a few of these conversations, a few of these shows that I do. And in fact, there's a gentleman named Cliff who has joined in to say hello. He's up in New York. He actually lives a couple hours away from me here in Virginia. By the way, folks, we don't see who's out there. So if you do care to say hello, please feel free to say hello. And of course, if you have any questions for Savannah, please feel free to ask. I love having senior SEs and long tenured SEs and managers and people who've been doing this for a long time. But I also love having people who are newer to the profession to share their journey, share their experiences, and maybe some of your words will help others in your situation maybe find the courage to consider this profession. So with that as a backdrop, when you and I first met, you told me a little bit about your journey into pre-sales. I thought it was a great one. Do you mind sharing for our audience your journey into pre-sales?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting one. It's definitely a non-traditional one. So I hope someone out there also, maybe has a similar background or comes from a non-traditional background and is thinking about becoming an SE. So yeah, I actually started out my career in higher education. So I was doing my PhD in English at the University of North Carolina, and I was teaching English, doing a bunch of research. It's called computational linguistics. So I was looking at literary text with software, essentially. And so I really loved that. But I kind of got to the place where I wanted to be more hands-on with the tech. I was tired of just writing about it, really. And I love the teaching aspect of it, but I just knew I wanted to do something more. And so I ended up using my writing skills, turning that into an internship. So I became a technical writing intern with a company called Commerce Tools. They make e-commerce software in the same space as Shopify, if you're familiar.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah. And so I was on their pre-sales, their SE team there as an intern technical writer, and I was doing RFPs, executive summaries, sales documents, that kind of thing. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And so from the internship transitioned into more of a full-time role, was managing, like I said, their RFP kind of content repository. So I was, learning all about the product, learning all about the tech. And I kind of got to the point where, I was on this fantastic team of very senior, very experienced SEs. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to be a real SE, be really part of that, not just, the writer on the team.
Right.
So talked to my manager, and yeah, kind of happened from there, put the gears into place to start turning. And yeah, I haven't looked back since. I've absolutely loved being an SE.
So I want to make sure I understand this part clear. You were this close to becoming Dr. Foreman.
Indeed, I was.
Remind me what steered you off of that path. You just found that you didn't like just writing about and I guess analyzing either the tech or the code or whatever it was that you were doing.
Yeah. So essentially, what I was doing research on how people talk about mental health in public online forums. So things like Reddit, potentially even, sites like LinkedIn or, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, and seeing how just common conversations about mental health had to do with, official literature like the DSM or, things like that, official documentation, things like that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I kind of got to the point where I was like, I love writing, I'm great at it, but I'm really writing more than I'm actually being hands-on with the tech.
Yeah.
And like I said, I love teaching. I really love teaching, but to be quite honest, it does not pay. It really does not pay. And I knew that going into it. And the further I got into it, the more I realized how much that was actually impacting my ability to, do things and,
Yeah.
live where I wanted and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a combination of things, but pivot came at the right time.
By the way, Zeke Smith is giving your heels a shout out. Nice to hear from you, Zeke.
Yeah.
So you decided to, I guess, pause, at least momentarily, pause your PhD. You got a job, and then you said you absolutely loved it. What about it did you love?
Oh, I don't know if I can narrow it down to one thing. So I was an intern for about 3 months, and I think after about a month, I pretty much knew that I was going to ask if they could turn it into a full-time position at the end of the 3 months. I loved how fast-paced it was. I loved, this is going to sound crazy, but I loved how much I had to learn in such a short period. It kept me so sharp, having to know about the product, knowing how to talk about it, and just fully immersing myself in a new industry. I loved how fast paced that was. It just re-kicked up that love for learning that I'd almost kind of lost in my PhD a little bit.
Which is so ironic, right?
Yeah, I know, right?
Well, and here's what I hear you saying is that you love the fast pace of business, of commerce, of technology. You loved challenging yourself and feeling as though you were challenged. And it's, from what I'm hearing, academia didn't necessarily satisfy that need. And probably knowing where you are now, you probably recognize that those are actually very strong indicators of someone who might actually be a sales engineer. So then you as you're doing this role, you're sort of looking across the aisle saying, well, those sales engineers over there that I'm in essence supporting, well, they seem like they're having even more fun than me, and I kind of want to go do what they're doing. Yeah,
exactly. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so when you approached your manager, did he or she have any hesitation at all, or did they recognize instantly, yep, you'd be great in this role?
I think it was a little bit of a combo. I definitely think that there was some hesitation because I didn't have prior sales experience. I, came in as an intern, and, that definitely affects like perception and, perception on ability to do things. But I was confident in my background. I spent 5 years teaching at the college level. So I had presented in front of big groups. I had presented in front of very skeptical, unengaged groups all the time, and I think that translated really well into being an SE. Maybe if I could go back, I would maybe do a better job of connecting those dots for the people around me, make a better case for myself, essentially.
Yeah. Well, and I think we talked about this in our first visit. The book by Daniel Pink called "To Sell is Human" is one of my all-time favorite books, and he talks about the fact that teachers are in sales, right? You stand in front of a group of, whether it's college students or middle school students, and try to, quote, sell them on the idea of the importance of I don't know, the studying the history of the Renaissance or something,
Yeah, exactly.
right? I mean, that is a sales job.
Yeah.
So you got your chance. Now you've been sort of plopped into a sales engineer role. How quickly were you actually out in the field meeting with customers? Did they sort of throw you in the deep end, or did they sort of let you work your way up to it? How did that transition take place?
Yeah, so it was actually a really cool transition. My manager at the time really like took into account my background and the fact that I didn't have direct customer and sales experience. So what we actually did, we came up with kind of like a ramping plan that would kind of transition me over the course of a few months into being a full SE. So where I actually started was cold calling with our BDR team, which was
Wow.
incredible. It was such a good learning experience. Commerce Tools is a mostly remote company, and so I actually got to go in office with our BDRs when our North Carolina office was open, and so got to literally get on the phones and make cold calls. So that was kind of my
I was going to
first.
say, was that an eye-opening experience?
I mean, it also just kind of showed me how difficult it is to, cold sell software, enterprise software like that. But yeah, it was definitely an experience. I will say that I feel like it kind of toughened me up a little bit to, people not wanting to talk to you or not being interested.
Yeah.
Kind
Yeah.
of, yeah, exactly.
Did it backfire a little bit, or did it almost did it start you make to wonder or question the decision to get into sales at all?
So not necessarily the decision to get into sales. I think, and my manager and I talked about this at the time too. At first I was kind of like, why am I doing this? Why am I, why am I doing cold calls with the BDRs if I want to be an SE? And I definitely felt that way as I was doing it and in the beginning of it. But after I was done with it and did move into those live customer conversations where I was, running the discovery, running, the demo, I think it really did prepare me well to just deal with customers in general.
Mhm.
Just kind of get a sense of, the things that people say or the things that people ask about or care about in reference to commerce tools. Yeah, so it took away kind of, I guess, kind of that initial stage fright of talking to a customer in that
Right.
way.
Yeah.
Um, I totally recommend it. If you don't have sales experience and you want to be an SE, it's not a bad place to start, honestly.
It's really an interesting insight, and it's particularly interesting for me because I've actually had people who are similar to you, whether they're teachers or maybe in some other profession, reach out to me and say, I'm thinking about becoming an SE, or I'd like to become an SE. And they've asked me, should I look for a BDR job first? If I'm fully honest, I think I've said no more times than I've said yes. But now
Yeah.
you're making me rethink that response. That maybe it's not a bad idea to just cut your teeth a little bit by having to pick up the phone or
Yeah.
reach out on LinkedIn. As you said, it sort of develops a little bit of a thicker skin to begin with. And
Yeah.
my guess is now that you're in an SE role, you probably have a little more appreciation for the account
Absolutely.
executives and the sales professionals that you partner with, because you know what some of what they're dealing with, right?
I was gonna say, yeah, it made me have a ton of respect for everything that happens in the sales process before the SE gets brought in. I mean, really, the BDRs do so much work and the account executives do so much work. They do so much of that, just like relationship, upfront customer management that the SEs sometimes don't even see, especially if you haven't done something like that before. If you haven't been a BDR, you don't really always get that kind of insight into what that process looks like. And it was such a good experience, honestly. I really meshed with our BDR team. I ended up doing a couple like technical product trainings with them just because it was such a good experience. And we just kind of mutually exchanged each other for the month that I worked with them. And it was great. But yeah, on the topic of BDR roles transitioning into SE, I think it's a great way to get your foot in the door, especially in an industry that's difficult to get into. It's a way to get into tech and into tech sales without jumping right into an SE position where they might want you to have an experience in sales or tech experience.
Yeah.
I think it could be a really, at least foot in the door.
Yeah. It's a great perspective. And frankly, the perspective that you have and the appreciation and respect that you have for BDRs and AEs and how much work they put in, as I like to say, just to get the meeting, that's a very, if I can use the term, professionally mature perspective that a lot of people who are 10 plus years older than you still don't have. So the fact that you or got that perspective at this point in your career is really going to help you a great deal. So that's a fabulous lesson learned. And Clifford is agreeing. Great way to learn the messaging and the objection handling. Something you said just a moment ago also triggered another thought for me, and that is you didn't necessarily have a technical background per se, right? You had more of an education background. Is that correct?
Yes.
Were you ever concerned or intimidated by the fact that you didn't have a strong technical background? Were you ever concerned or fearful that might be limiting for you?
I don't think I was ever personally concerned that it would be limiting for me. I think that even now I still get pushback on not being technical enough, but I think for me, I've always been technical in my own regard. Like growing up, I played video games with my dad. My dad built computers, so I've always been around tech. I've always been interested in it. I've never had trouble, like picking up a new software or anything like that. And even before I was at UNC and I was doing some like website development and website editing for UNC, and so I wasn't completely non-technical, I would say.
Right.
So I was pretty confident in my ability to at least learn a software. I think maybe that didn't translate super well because I don't have any official background in tech. But I think once people started working with me, they were like, oh, she is actually pretty technical and she can pick it up very quickly. I think enjoying it too is part of it. I love learning. And so learning more about the tech is just like candy for my brain, basically.
I so love that. And you're right. And people ask me a lot, is not having a formal background or education in technology, is that limiting? The answer is yes, for certain companies or certain roles, right? I mean, if you're talking to a cybersecurity company and they need sales engineers with a very specific background and experience, then yes. But in the vast majority of sales engineer or solution consulting roles, and in your case, you're familiar and comfortable with tech, and you have confidence in jumping in and learning.
Yeah,
that's usually what's required. So that's interesting. What were some of the surprises? So you eased your way into the role. They had you start out as a BDR, so you sort of cut your teeth a little bit with what it means to be in sales. At some point, I'm assuming they sort of dropped you finally into the deep end of the pool and said, go forth and prosper. What were some of the things that surprised you about the role or the experience early on?
Yeah, I think that honestly, I think one of the biggest things going into it was I really, and this is kind of telling on myself too. I really thought that SEs were just the technical support on the call. They were the technical support in the sales process, and that's what they did. So I was so surprised once I got into it to learn that it is not tech support. It is so strategic in terms of positioning, working with the account executives, working with, different stakeholders internally and externally. It's so much more than just knowing the tech or being the technical resource on the call. That was a big surprise for me, a surprise that I welcomed, but it was, it's different than what I expected.
Well, and that's what I was going to say is I could see interpreting that in more than, two way, or at least two ways. One way to interpret that is maybe feeling a little intimidated by the fact that, wow, it's much bigger than just being a technical resource. The other is a feeling of empowerment. Like,
Yeah.
wow, I really have the opportunity to make an impact and make a difference. And would you say you felt sort of both sides of that coin?
I would say it was a little bit intimidating, but it almost like kind of re-excited me about it because I was like, oh my gosh, there's even more to it than I even realized. And strategy and like planning and stuff like that is something that comes so easily to me and something that I genuinely enjoy doing. So I think once I kind of discovered that, I was like, oh yeah, like why didn't I start this sooner, honestly?
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, you still started relatively early in your
Yeah,
career, so I consider those people who started before the age of 30 to be relatively lucky. So
yeah, no,
um,
fair enough.
yeah, because I was 15 years into my career before I discovered pre-sales,
Wow.
and so glad that I finally did. Nonetheless, that's another story for another conversation. So one of the things that surprised you was just how big the role was. Was there anything early on that you struggled with? Anything that you found like, wow, this is a tough part of this job?
Um, So I would say since I hadn't really been customer facing before, that was a big change for me. So
Mhm.
switching from being kind of like the background writer to being front and center, technical person strategically on the call was a massive change. And for me, I tell people this all the time. You probably can't tell from me presenting and like talking and things like that, but I'm a massive introvert. So being in front of customers multiple times a week, leading calls multiple times a week, it was a change. It was a change of pace for sure.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because I have worked with a number of sales engineers who are, if I can use the term, they identify as an introvert, like you have as well, but they're brilliant in front of customers.
Yeah.
And so I say I refer to them as the people who quote play an extrovert on TV,
Yes,
but
exactly.
but they recharge either with downtime, with quiet time,
Yes.
et cetera. And that's probably your case. So for that reason, then did you find that you had to do certain things to sort of charge your battery, or did you have to do certain things to sort of elevate your energy level when you did get in front of customers?
Yes, definitely. So I think a big thing for me was learning that I did kind of have to put on that extrovert version of my personality. And so figuring out what that looked like for me and how to, turn that on essentially. So I have kind of like a prep routine that I do before like customer calls. Are you familiar with somatic shaking?
I'm not. So I'm now I'm the student.
Yes,
Please inform the uninformed.
yes, I promise it's nothing too hooky, I guess. Essentially, it's a way to kind of move nervous, anxious energy out of your body. So you're literally like shaking your body, your full limbs. If you've ever seen like after dogs play, they do like a full body shake.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a nervous system reset for them. And so I do kind of a similar thing. Helps me
Interesting.
kind of get those, stage fright kind of intro call, nervousness out. And it helps pump me up too, honestly. I'm moving around the room and standing also really helps me. I usually stand when I give a demo so I can, move around more freely and project.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are my
I love
two
that.
biggest
I love
things.
that. Yeah. I don't know if it's obvious to you. I am standing. I
Yeah,
stand
I was gonna say it looks like you're standing.
I stand whenever I do these conversations, and frequently when I'm present. Certainly, when I'm running a workshop, I'm always standing
Yeah.
behind the lens of the cameras. I like to say, and I'm with you. I mean, finding the physical manifestations that help us arrive at our best and deliver at our best
Yeah.
makes a huge difference. Savannah, let me push pause just for a moment. Folks, I'm speaking to Savannah Foreman. She is a newly hired solution consultant with user testing. She also has her own podcast called Sessions with Savannah. We're talking about her journey into pre-sales as we just agreed, quote, so you think you want to be a pre-sales professional or a sales engineer. We've had a number of people share a few comments. New SEs will say drinking from the fire hose. It does not go away. And yes, SEs oftentimes become the quarterback. Well said, Cliff. And Ryan chimes in, relationship building and getting so many different perspectives are the favorite part. Well said, Ryan. Savannah, since Ryan mentioned his favorite part of the job, I'm inspired to ask you, what is your, and how many years have you been in this profession now?
So just about 2.5.
Okay. So I'll be an AE and round up. We'll call it 3 years. So you've been doing this for about 3 years.
About 3 years, yeah.
What would you say is your favorite part of the job?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Honestly, I might have to take a page out of your book and say the preparation part. I really love creating the demo, putting on all those like final polishing touches. This is going to sound crazy. I love making my own slides. Like I love, very detailed tailoring all of it. And feeling like I get it like just right for the customer. That's my favorite part.
And so first of all, it probably shouldn't shock me, but it's somewhat alarming how much you and I seem to think alike or similar.
Yeah.
Because I love the preparation stage myself.
Right.
And it's sort of like there's a certain anticipation. Like when I'm assembling slides or I'm putting the glossy final touch. Yeah. You're right. There's sort of an anticipation of showing up and delivering. So where I'm going with this is, why do you think that is? Like what's the higher sort of level of satisfaction that you get from that preparation phase?
I think it's feeling like I honestly am helping someone and am understanding what they need. I love, like you said, the preparation and that feeling of showing up, knowing that you've done a good job and you're ready to show them what a good job you did and that it's actually going to make a difference for them. That's the higher motivation, I would say.
I love that. And you're right. And something that this audience has probably heard me say on more than one occasion, I sincerely believe that we are all most fulfilled when serving other people. Yep. And I think that's, if there's anything, more than anything, I think in this role is that we sincerely are in a position where if we've been given the opportunity to really understand what their challenges are, what they're trying to achieve, and we have just the right solution, there's no better feeling than coming in and first establishing, here's how we understand or where we understand you currently are and what you're trying to do. And we've got the roadmap. We've got the solution that's going to get you there. There's nothing better than feeling like you're really making a difference and making a contribution in that regard. So that's fabulous. Let's see. Cliff chimed in here. Favorite part, getting the story just right for a particular customer. Really what we're talking about here. So Savannah, I'm going to invite you to share a little bit of maybe the less fortunate part of your early career when you found yourself on the wrong side of a reduction in force and you found yourself out of work looking for a new role. And if I understand correctly, it was about a 4-month period between the time you were released to the time you landed this new job. Do you mind talking a little bit about just the experience and, what were some of the things that you learned, not only about sort of just that process, but maybe even about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we can call it what it is. I got laid off. I got laid off into February, which is actually about 3 weeks after I got a promotion in my role as an SE, which was, that was heartbreaking, honestly.
Yeah. Thank you. That's it is. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was definitely very tough. I would say, gosh, I've learned so much over the last few months. So the biggest thing I've learned honestly is that I do belong in this role and that I can do it. And I think, being kind of forced out of my role in a way where I felt like I wasn't ready to be done. I'd just come off a promotion. I had a lot of momentum. It really just showed me that like I said, I could do it and that I still wanted to do it, even if it wasn't at the company that I thought it would be at. I had just grown to love the role so much that, being laid off, it was a motivator to get right into the next one. Just because I loved it so much. I wasn't ready to stop when I had to stop, essentially. So
It's such a powerful perspective. And someone in that situation where you've just been given a promotion and then a few weeks later, you're in essence handed your exit papers. That would be for some people, for a lot of people, that could be the event that makes them consider a different profession, and or sort of quote gives up
yeah.
on the profession. And for you, it was just the opposite. For you, it actually became the fuel that added to the fire in your belly, if I can use that
Yes.
term, for this profession. And it really it seems like it really solidified your position, your mental state, and your feelings about the role, and gave you, actually, ironically, it seems like it almost gave you more confidence
Yeah.
that this is the right role for me, it's the right profession for me, and it gave you more determination, is what I think I'm hearing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I came to the point where, as I made my SE transition at Commerce Tools, my team was supporting me, my manager was supporting me, and then all of a sudden I didn't have that anymore. And so I really had to support myself and, champion myself as, you can do this, even though you don't have a team behind you, you don't have a company behind you right now. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't keep learning or keep trying. I won't I won't say I didn't think about giving up, because I definitely did. There were so many points where I was like, should I start looking at tech writing again? Should I think about going back to teaching, or even, like an enablement support kind of role? And yeah, I'm glad that I stuck it out. I'm really glad that I stuck it out.
Good for you. And who knows what your future holds in terms of the progression of your career. But something is certain for me, and that is, if you were to decide to get into management, I think some of the experiences that you've had, being let go, finding new jobs, sort of the lessons you've learned, will make you a very, very effective leader and manager of people, if you decide to move in that direction. So I think it's just fabulous. I want to pause just for a moment to acknowledge Zeke. When a prospect interrupts a call to say something like, "You sound like you could be in whatever the industry is," it's so satisfying, because you're deeply connecting to their needs. Zeke, incredibly well said, sir. Indeed. So here you are now, Savannah. You're about to launch into this new role with it, or a similar role with a new company. What have you done to mentally prepare yourself for jumping back in? And are there certain things that you're going to be sure that you do with intention in this new company?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first off, taking a little bit of time between when I found out I got the offer, signing it, and then actually my start date. So taking a little bit of time to kind of reset from the job search and, come off of that kind of stressful survival mode feeling. Honestly, that was a big piece. But as far as actually prepping for the role, yeah, I've already been digging into it. So
Yeah.
essentially, what I really want to do this time is, kind of before I even start, to build out my own onboarding goals and my own kind of like onboarding packet. So I've started putting together, customer case studies, metrics, things like that.
Yeah.
Learning about the ICP of user testing, learning about, the personas and stakeholders, really just putting together my own SE onboarding packet, essentially.
Yeah.
I know I'll obviously get great onboarding and training once I start, but I wanted to go in with, some kind of background there. Another thing I really like to do is create GPT models. And so I've actually created a specific user testing solutions consultant coach, kind of onboarding coach.
Very cool.
So it has all of the information about user testing, like I said, customer insights, metrics, all of that.
Yeah.
So I have kind of like a little assistant as I'm working through things as well.
That's brilliant. Well, and here's what strikes a chord for me is, and there's a book I think called Extreme Ownership, and you in a number of the things that you have shared have demonstrated taking extreme ownership of your own success and not leaving it in the hands of others, and looking for how can I secure myself. Yes. and take responsibility for my own success. I had a leader a number of years ago say to me, Chris, we are all the CEOs of our own career. Yep. And I thought that was really good advice. And it seems like you've taken a similar perspective. Mike McDowell, how are you, sir? Seems like I joined. Yes, Mike, good to see you, my friend. I hope you're well. So
Mike is, if I could just say real quick. So Mike is how I found user testing. So he also presented at DemoFest and spoke so highly of user testing. And so I reached out to him, and that's actually how I got introduced to user testing. So Mike will be one of my new coworkers.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Mike is someone that I have a great deal of respect for, and his book and his work is fantastic. So you're going to have a great colleague there to show you the ropes a little bit. Speaking of DemoFest, you mentioned DemoFest. So I'd love to just talk a little bit about some of the things that because you really have put yourself out there. You were part of DemoFest. You've got this podcast that you were maintaining even while you were out of work looking for a new role. Let's talk a little bit about and you've already said that you're an introvert, which sort of seems to be contradictory to the idea of sort of putting yourself out there. Yeah. Talk a little bit about what's inspired you to do this, and what have you gained in return in doing so?
Yeah, I think as far as inspiration, part of it was, wanting to put myself out there, knowing that it would be for my own benefit, even if in the moment it was a little nerve-wracking. I love connecting with other people in the industry and being able to, hear their perspectives, hear their take on things. That's one of my favorite parts about being an SE also is, meeting other SEs, talking strategy, talking about, the good, the bad, everything else. And I think another part of it too was a big reason I wanted to put myself out there is I couldn't really find anyone who sounded like me or was really talking about the things that I wanted to talk about. You mentioned obviously, being a young woman in this field, there's not a ton of us and there's not a ton of us that are very, public facing, putting ourselves out there in such a public way. And so I wanted to put my voice out there and, see if it resonated with other people, not just, young women in the space, but, there are lots of experiences that come with being an SE that are really universal. And, it's universal for SEs, but also unique to SEs. And so I think talking about that, talking about my experience, something really valuable that's come out of it is being able to connect with other people who've had similar experiences and who say, I went through a layoff too. And exactly what you said, it sucked, it hurt, it was really hard, but when it happened to me, no one was talking about it. I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. And, so I think hearing from other people that, they're having similar experiences, and that hearing about mine was, it made them feel, a little less alone, a little less heard. That's a huge motivation for me.
I mean, frankly, it's one of the reasons I do this show. It's one of the reasons I invited you to be on this show, right?
Yeah.
And you're right. As I like to say, no one understands the plight of the sales engineer quite like sales engineers, right?
Yes.
And leaders in particular. No one
Yeah.
understands the plight of the sales engineer leader like other sales engineer leaders. And we rarely have the opportunity to really have sort of just candid conversations internally about things that aren't, because most discussions internally are usually related to specific accounts, specific opportunities, the product,
Yeah.
the
KPIs,
enhancements,
yeah.
right? Process, right? So to be able to take a half a step back and actually just talk about the profession, I think is really healthy. And allow me to just suggest, good on you for putting yourself out there. You would not be on this stage, if I can use that term, having this conversation had I not seen you on DemoFest. And,
Yeah, exactly.
seeing you on DemoFest inspired me to reach out, and I thought your story was inspiring. So here we are. So, and I do think the message is to people who are looking to grow in their profession, who are looking to gain. My guess is you have probably gained a fair amount of confidence in doing some of these things, right? So I just think it's fabulous. Mike said the plight of the sales engineer. Sound like the bestseller. Actually, just Mike, that may be something that I need to dig into. Ian Clark has asked a question. Do either of you have a framework that you can share, for example, the equivalency of to the project management lifecycle? Well, Ian, first of all, thank you for your question. I just so happen to have a framework called the 6 Habits. And so since you've asked, I'm going to see if I can, I don't know if I can share this or not. I don't, and you always worry about just trying to share something sort of on the fly, but let me see if I can do so without hurting myself. And
don't do a demo crime. No demo crimes, please.
Bring the right thing up. Is that it? There you go. Are we seeing the right thing? I've got to leave it up. So there's my framework, the 6 Habits framework. So if you're not familiar with it, then I'll invite you to take a look. And let's see if I can remove it now from, there we go. So there's the 6 Habits framework, Ian, that I'll invite you to look at. It's available on LinkedIn. I'm sorry, it's available on Amazon, and of course, just IM me afterwards, and I'll be happy to tell you a little bit more about it.
It's fantastic. You should read it.
Well, thank you for that. And by the way, since we also have Mike McDowell, I'll invite you to check out his book as well. We've actually got a couple of authors here in the conversation. Savannah, believe it or not, we've been at this for almost 45 minutes already. Time just flies on these conversations. I do want to be respectful of your time, but before we wrap up, as you sort of reflect on what's ahead, and you mentioned ChatGPT, so clearly you're leveraging AI for yourself. Where do you aspire to grow and develop in the coming years as a sales engineer? Like as you think about your profession, what are certain things that you for yourself are seeking to develop and grow in?
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned earlier about, potentially moving into leadership, and that's definitely where I see my career going. I would absolutely love to lead a team of SEs in the future. And so I think, just kind of diving more into the SE craft, as well as, people management and management of SEs and SE teams. Yeah, I would absolutely love to do that one day.
Well, and I mentioned this before, that seems to me something that would be very much in your future and something that you could tackle. And I do think that that's a logical progression for people with the right motivation, the right skill set, right? and you certainly seem to have that. So I can certainly see that progression for you.
Yeah.
Is there anything as you thought about today's conversation, and I don't know, maybe you're doing the shake off, what did you call it? The semantic shaking?
The somatic shaking, yes.
Did you do any somatic shaking before today's conversation?
I did a tiny bit. I was not as nervous for this conversation.
Good.
I knew it was going to be more of a conversation. Like, I
Just
said
casual
before,
chat.
I'm out of the interview cycle, so I'm not being evaluated, thank God.
Exactly. Just a casual chat. But as you thought about today's conversation, was there anything else in particular that you were hoping we might touch on that maybe we haven't, and you just care to share, or something you were hoping that we'd have an opportunity to touch on?
I think we've touched on most of it. I think just in terms of if you are someone out there who wants to move into pre-sales, who wants to move into being an SE, and you're not sure if you belong, or you're not sure if you're technical enough or if you can do it, if you want to, you can. You don't have to tick every box. There are most of the things about being an SE you can learn. There's skills that you can develop. And if you have a real passion for it and you really care about helping people make better decisions in terms of software, that's really the job. And, you can do it and you do belong. So just, like I said, if you have a passion for it, go for it. Absolutely.
It's great advice. And really, really love that you are living proof of the very advice that you're giving. That you were on a path to become or get a PhD in English, if I heard that correctly, and you literally took an about face right turn, and here you are now talking about the technical sales profession. Yeah. If you could go back to, let's say, your PhD self, or at least your doctoral student self, is there anything that any piece of advice you might give yourself now, having a little bit of distance and perspective?
Yeah, I think, making the decision to leave my PhD program was a difficult one. And it was one that I was, scared to make on my own behalf. And I was scared to disappoint other people too. So I think if I could go back, I would tell myself not to be worried about that, honestly, that you're going to figure it out no matter what, whether it is sales engineering or whether it's something else. The fact that I even felt called to move into something else, I think, I'm glad that I trusted that. And I think looking back, just be less scared about disappointing other people. If it's what you want to do and you feel like in your heart that that's the right decision, do it. You're going to be way happier.
Such good advice, Savannah. And you're right. As I reflect on my career, and I graduated from university in 1991. So that gives me 33, 34 years of professional experience.
Yeah.
And I wasn't at many stops and starts and twists and turns. I wasn't particularly certain. I wasn't always happy. I wasn't sure if that decision was the right decision, similar to yourself. And there were many years where I wanted to do something like I'm finally doing now.
Yeah.
And yet I didn't get here until I was over 50.
Yeah.
But as I reflect on all those stops and starts and twists and turns and rights and left, I realize now that every one of those steps was an important step in the journey.
Yes.
And there was actually a plan. I just didn't see it at the time.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I think that sort of goes with what you're saying, which is, I bet that was a really hard decision for you to make.
Yeah.
But you had the courage to trust your instincts.
Yeah.
You had the courage to listen to that voice inside, and you probably didn't know exactly which direction you wanted to go, but you clearly identified the direction that you did not want to go in. And sometimes those are the right decisions. Is if you know what door to say no to that door. And it's okay if you're not sure what the next door is. Go through one, and that will lead to another one.
Yes,
So
exactly.
that is a fabulous way to wrap up this conversation. Savannah, I enjoy speaking with you a great deal. I want to wish you the best in your career. You're a delightful young person. If I can use that word, I just feel like I'm much older than you. So I say that with the most respect I can muster. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Chris. I really appreciate it, and I really enjoyed our conversation as well. It's
good.
I think this is an amazing platform that you have, and the fact that, like you said, you often talk with SE leaders and senior SEs. I think, having someone like me who is more early career is fantastic. So I appreciate you giving me the space to speak about it as well. It's huge for me,
Well, I'm very happy to hear that. And I hope in, 10 or 15 years when you've published your book, or who knows, maybe 5 years, if anything that I've done or this show did to sort of help you along, I hope there'll be one little reference in the bottom corner of the last page.
Yes.
Savannah, you are going to have a great career. I'm certain of it. Thank you so much for being here. Hang around just for a moment. After the fact, we'll part ways backstage. To those of you who hung around for this long, thank you so much for being here. Cliff and Ian and Zeke and Mike and anybody else who was here. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Savannah. If you want to be alerted to these, you can follow Tech Sales Advice or hashtag Tech Sales Advice. And of course, you can always go to techsalesmastery.com to learn more about the work that we do. Thanks again for being here. We will catch you next time. Savannah, thank you so much.